know it's right after lunch, so we're all feeling very full and ready to go, ready to learn. So I want to start off with an exercise. So if everyone could, just take a moment, take 3 breaths. So during those 3 breaths, there was almost 400 gigabytes of information transferred on the internet. With the world moving so fast around us, pausing for even just a moment like that can have monumental impacts. So it helps us limit distractions and really harness the power of now. And in this world, it may be one of our biggest superpowers. So the next time you're about to walk into a meeting, or you're just standing at your desk finding yourself creatively blocked, I encourage you to just take that single breath. I am confident that you will notice a difference. You'll feel sharper, more focused, and you'll be harnessing a harmony with nature that is just a part of our natural life. You breathe every moment of the day. It is something that happens with or without your control. So when you pay mindful attention to it, you're actually unlocking a level of power that is within each of us. It was something that's really had a profound impact on me over the years, and really so simple and something that everyone can do, whether it's interacting with your children, your peers, in design. Just taking a moment to pause has a substantial impact. So I really appreciate this quote from Chad Ming Tan. He says, learning to calm the mind starts with being more mindful of the body. And so that's where it all begins for me. Whether it's design, personal experience, or trying to define emotional intelligence for myself, everything came back to the breath. And having that clear mind really empowers us. So let's rewind 15 years when I started my career out in design. I was really coming from high school where in football they coached me to have this fear-based motivation. So don't you go out there and fail. You have to succeed, and you have to do these things that I've taught you. And so I started to try to translate that into the business world, and it simply wasn't translating. I found myself worried more about not doing something right than actually trying to do what was right for the particular problem in front of me. And by actually shifting my mentality and bringing it more towards a positive tone in my inner monologue, I've been able to reduce stress, calm my worry, and introduce more confidence in general when it comes to negative outcomes, and really reflect and learn as I'm going along. You can't let that inner monologue define you, and by taking a few breaths here and there, you're able to mindfully focus on something that takes you away from that distracting inner monologue. Not to mention, breaths taken slow, when you do it slow and deep, stimulate the vagus nerve, and that activates the parasympathetic nervous system. Now, this is another thing that started to tie together as I was going through leadership training and I was learning from various inputs. A lot of things started connecting together. Awareness, breaths, and then even this, the activation of the parasympathetic nervous system resonated across multiple inputs. Now, to kind of dig into that, again, science, all connected to this, the parasympathetic nervous system is a part of the autonomic nervous system. So the partner and the other division of that is the sympathetic nervous system. Now, stress activates the sympathetic nervous system. So it really starts to fire off that amygdala and that fight or flight. So every time you have stress, that sympathetic nervous system starts to fire up. We can counteract that by taking breaths and activating the parasympathetic nervous system and the powers that are within it. So for starters, some of the things that happen when you do that are you invoke renewal. So your body starts to rebuild. It also can do that neurologically. possibility of new neural tissue growth, as well as engaging your immune system. And most importantly to us in the design field is you're more open to new ideas, emotions, and other people, especially when they're different, open to new possibilities, learning, adapting, and change. So what I've kind of seen is that when I do those breaths and I'm in that one-on-one session or I'm in that review, I actually am more able to embrace what is being brought to me because I've gone ahead and invoked the parasympathetic nervous system with those breaths. It's amazing how profound of an impact something so simple can have on my day-to-day process. So I encourage you, the next time you find yourself in a situation where you need to be receptive to feedback or you're having a one-on-one conversation with someone, just take a simple breath or a few breaths and really invoke that power of learning. So again, to help encourage learning here, let's take a moment to take some more breaths. By repeating it over and over again, you're actually encouraging growth by exercising it regularly. So simply doing it over and over and over again, you're actually building up muscles similar to the way that you do when you're working out. This is one of those things that it doesn't take studying for a doctorate or deep reading across multiple different subject matters to learn. It's something as simple as taking breaths, meditating, being mindful, and it doesn't take long. 50 hours later, you may find yourself ready and prepared to take on things with this newfound strength. So digging into it a little bit further, I'm going to talk a little bit about emotional intelligence. I'm sure many of you have heard about it in some type of article that you've read in the blogs that you see. It's really infiltrated the business world, and from my perspective, in a very positive way. It's a key leadership skill that is talked about across all the various trainings that I have taken in around leadership. And frankly, you could do an entire presentation solely on this subject. So I'm going to focus in a couple of the areas that I feel relate to us in the design field and specifically to the breath. I'm not going to dive into everything else, but I definitely encourage you to find resources where you can learn more about emotional intelligence, as it's something vital to our journey towards being leaders in our field. Now, it is something that is a journey, and it's not something that you should expect to read up on and then be an expert on like you could with some of your skills. It is something that you're mindfully paying attention to it every day and building that awareness of emotions, learning how to leverage them to your advantage in situations, and not letting your inner monologue or stress be your driver when reacting to people, but you're actually pausing for a moment, finding that calmness within and staying centered, even in the most challenging of circumstances. So in Emotional Intelligence, Why It Can Matter More Than IQ, written by Daniel Goleman, he laid out what's kind of looked at as one of the more common ways to kind of break down emotional intelligence. So it's self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. I'm going to focus on self-awareness and empathy, but each of these are an important element of emotional intelligence. So just to kind of dig into each of these at a high level, self-awareness is the knowledge of one's own internal states, preferences, resources, or intuition. Self-regulation is the management of internal states, impulses, and resources. Motivation is emotional tendencies that guide or facilitate us reaching our goals. Empathy is the awareness of others' feelings, needs, and concerns, and even within ourselves, having that same level of awareness. Social skill is the adeptness at inducing desirable responses in others. And as we move forward, like I said, I will dig a little bit more into self-awareness and empathy. But no, I wanted to just add this from Mang. He says, by bringing mindful attention to the body, you strengthen the part of your brain called the insula, which is highly correlated with strong emotional awareness and empathy. I really feel that meditation is another way to bring forth these powerful senses, because there you're also focusing on your breath. There's various different ways that you could practice meditation, and again, could, I'm sure, talk for 30 minutes about those various ways. I've distilled it down personally to simply focusing on the breath. Like, if I can pay mindful attention to my body, I am renewing myself. I'm activating the parasympathetic nervous system. I am improving myself in the way I interact with others. So right now in the audience, raise your hand if you're finding yourself focused or distracted by your inner monologue. Who here is focused? Who here is distracted? And that's life, right? Each moment of the day, that's what's happening. We're battling that inner monologue. Even up here, I'm trying to keep my mind quiet through pace and breaths so that I don't get distracted and that I'm focused on the presentation at hand. And the more you take a moment to take those breaths and focus and understand that that companion of your inner monologue is there, but there's a time and a place where you can really start to harness it. And so he also added that when you combine practices such as journaling with that mindful attentiveness, you start to improve your self-assessment. There is no doubt that one of the ways to become a stronger leader is to better know yourself. And you can do that through growing your emotional intelligence through various ways, including meditation. I really learned that there's so many layers to emotional intelligence that, you really want to just chip away at it over time. Again, it's not something that you're going to read up on and suddenly be able to do. You're going to learn through practice, through application, through understanding, and really pushing your own understanding of it. So self-awareness to me is one of the biggest of all, because the more I know about myself, the more I'm able to help others. If I can't find a way to look inside and really be able to interpret my emotions as they're coming up, to navigate that inner monologue, I'm not as successful of a leader. By taking time to pay attention to myself, I'm actually making myself, my team stronger through our interactions. It really came to a head for me a few years ago. I was in design reviews. I had been given a lot of feedback from the CEO that this was the design direction that we had to go. And so I was presenting in front of my peers. And as they critiqued me and were providing me with constructive feedback, I got defensive and was more focused on what my limitations were and what I perceived as the why I had gotten there, opposed to being mindful of the feedback that they were giving me and being receptive to what they were bringing to the table, considering they didn't understand those limitations. So opposed to getting defensive now in reviews, I'm more able to kind of understand what they're trying to bring to the situation and where I can find that nugget of information and what they're sharing to really help elevate the design for our users. Because ultimately that was what's important to me, the business needs that were being driven by the CEO and the user. And that feedback, when it was coming in, it was just seemed, negative, seemed attacking me. But when I actually pulled out and had more self-awareness and pulled the truth out of that situation, I'm finding more ability to take that feedback and move forward with it. So building on it, a book that I would absolutely recommend is called Conscious Business, Building Through Values. Really talks a lot about how you can apply this thinking strategically within business. But there, Fred Kaufman says, self-awareness is the capacity to know what's happening within yourself. It's one of those things that you kind of believe, I have to know. I'm with myself all the time. I know what's going on there. But when you actually pause to reflect, you can really begin to build up that strong self-awareness and know what's happening. And once you've done that, that's really half the battle. Being able to navigate your own emotions empowers you in ways that you can relate better with others. He also says that awareness is the foundation of freedom and responsibility. It's a basic tool for managing emotions and actions. Again, being able to silence that inner monologue, being receptive to others' feedback, even when it's delivered in ways that are driven by their emotion, being keyed in on understanding that really starts to open up when you know it within yourself. So when you be able to sense that flight or flight starting to be activated because stress is really hitting high, taking those breaths, pausing, and separating yourself from the situation, either by meditating or going for a walk, taking mindful activities where you attempt to clear your mind, you're going to find a power that is within all of us. Mang also says that when we then focus on developing a depth of self-knowledge, that leads to self-mastery, because when you can clearly and objectively see when and how you are triggered, you can begin to effectively deploy mental and emotional strategies to skillfully navigate those situations. Again, knowing yourself through that self-mastery allows you to clearly and objectively see those triggers. Knowing those triggers puts you in a position of power to react to them. You're not taken over by them. You're able to kind of address them as they come up and appropriately react in the moment with what is there within that feeling you have. So empathy, another big thing in our field. So whether it's for our peers that we're working with or for our users, being mindful of a view other than yours is imperative to success. Really starts to shine when you employ things like active listening, and acknowledging and understanding emotions inside of ourselves and others is where we can start to build up continued strength. So I found this good quote from the Mindful Tools content team. They say, to develop empathy, start by simply thinking about other people's vantage point or viewpoint. Imagine how they must be feeling and use active listening skills to understand them fully when they express their emotions to you. As you begin to start to be able to read other people's emotions and react to that efficiently, you are becoming stronger and ultimately aware of both yourself and others. So kind of closing it out, empathy really represents the ability to accurately perceive and relate to emotions of others, be they positive or negative. And it's so often prevalent in our field as we interact with others, the various types of people that you have to engage with. So you may be presenting to someone who's very receptive and open to new ideas because they're in touch with their self-awareness and they practice mindfulness. Or you may talk to someone who's very emotionally charged and is often driven by what they feel inside, and that controls with them. By being able to navigate them both positive and negative, you find yourself in a position where you're having better conversations, you're driving to more successful outcomes, and you're really engaging in ways that drive towards positive outcomes. Because that kind of leads to collaboration of multiple humans. So I phrase it like that because ultimately that's what our day-to-day is. Whether we're engaging in user testing, trying to get feedback from our users, engaging with stakeholders, engaging with our peers, that is what it's all about. We are not in a business of isolation. We're in a business of collaborating. Now, there's always a time for isolation, and you need that moment to recharge, especially if you're more introverted like I am. There's no doubt that tonight I'm going to, sit quietly on my chair and relax, because all this outwardly facing collaboration with this group is really going to drive that need to energize. But that's what it's about. It's about knowing yourself, knowing where your strengths are. Are you someone who comes to a conference like this and are actually powered up by it and rejuvenated? Take action based off of that. If you know that you need to regroup or actually pause and reflect after something this intense, know yourself, and knowing others helps with that as well. So another element of all of this is shown in a Harvard Business Review article called Primal Leadership, the Hidden Driver of Great Performance. They said, we cannot improve our emotional intelligence or change our leadership style without help from others. That really resonated with me. So I could go off into a mountain in Tibet and really connect with myself and come out of it a much stronger person. But ultimately, I need to employ it with other people and engage them to continue that learning. So as much as I can learn about myself, it's only as powerful as what I can use when interacting with others. And that's where I can really start to unlock success. Fred Kaufman also says that our experiences are significant because our minds are constantly interpreting our perceptions. This one really hit home for me from where I was at. Again, my perceptions, using that example of the creative critique, my perceptions were, I have all of this feedback from the CEO, I can't change anything, it's what he wants, this is what I have to do. But if I actually have paused and considered that, my mind was really doing a lot of that interpretation for me. It wasn't necessarily every element of the story. That was a part of it. I was letting it drive my thinking and not really opening myself up to the possibilities that were beyond it. Jason Edelman also said in a Pluralsight course, we experience reality indirectly because we are always deleting, distorting, and generalizing. We view our representation of the experience of the territory, not the territory itself. So think about that for a second. I have my own perceptions of what this experience is like. Each one of you sitting here has it. And ultimately, where is that accurate representation? I mean, there's no doubt we're standing here in a building amongst towers in a big city. Being able to understand that our perceptions actually influence what we are taking in, and at times may even distract us from knowing what the territory itself is in front of us, really is a huge step in the right direction. So, selectively paying attention or creating misrepresentations of reality, drawing conclusions based on your experiences. When you're interacting with others, being aware that that is what could be going on inside of their head helps you navigate more efficiently what the best outcome that you can reach with them. Because again, this is a team sport. We're not in this alone. And so being more able and aware of the various blockers that we may have help us unlock a power within. I also appreciate this quote from a Roman emperor that ruled during 161 to 180, Marcus Aurelius. He said in his journal, everything turns on your assumptions about it, and that's on you. You can pluck out the hasty judgment at will, and like steering a ship around a point, you'll find calm seas, fair weather, and a safe port. That plucking out of hasty judgments at will is a powerful ability. I know that more often than not, when something stressful hits me, I'm immediately going to react in one way, but the more I pause, take a breath, and reflect, the more I've been able to kind of see these outcomes drive to different successes. For example, when I first really started unlocking all of this knowledge about 6 years ago, found myself in meetings with senior leadership at a marketing agency I was in. And I would constantly come out of those meetings to be like, those were some great ideas, Garrett. Like, how did you do that? Like, that was amazing. And I paused and reflected, and I was like, I didn't do anything. I actively listened. I didn't let my inner monologue distract me. And I was just connected with the problem that we were having in a way that I could actually harness a power to drive towards greater outcomes, and not being distracted through my own perceptions, not letting the feedback of others drive me, led to successful outcomes that were acknowledged by senior leadership. And it was just amazing to kind of be able to pause for a moment and reflect that doing something so simple, opening up a window in that way, had unlocked something that I didn't even know I had within me. So to give a little bit of tools and how you can employ this yourself on a daily basis, it's your choice. So taking some notes from Dan Brown's presentation at UI 21, he said, perceive. Recognize when someone's mindset is preventing them from doing their best work. Again, empathy, self-awareness, emotional intelligence, being able to be receptive to something that is not just your own will help you through observation. Then understand. Adopt behaviors to help you and your team to reach shared understanding of the design problem, context, and direction. I can't emphasize this enough. We really want to go forth and bring the best outcome for our users or for a design problem at hand. And we are obviously going to feel passionately that given our research and our understanding of the problem, that what we have is right. But adopting behaviors that help everybody engage in this design process is going to level up the team's ability to deliver. Choose. Wait. Do not act impulsively. That is where the breath comes in. I encourage you, anytime you run into a stressful situation, even stopping to take a single breath, I'd encourage you to take more like 3 to really start harnessing that power, but stopping, pausing, and not acting impulsively, you're going to find yourself shifting away from where you may have used to react and immediately drive towards that emotional reaction and get passionate and strong. Pause, wait. You may actually change your mind and say, you know what, that emotion is very strong right now, but it's not productive, it's not going to influence the outcome here, and I'm going to choose not to act impulsively. Then look inside. That self-awareness. It is so important. As he put it here, so take a moment and feel the emotion to better choose your next step. Self-reflection, evaluating your own inner monologue, those types of things are going to help you choose your next step in a more powerful way. So some practical application here. So some of the things that I do on a regular basis, I meditate, I mindfully breathe. I do yoga, but I call it more of mindful stressing or poor man's yoga, active listening, and then introspection. So just knowing yourself. None of this can be successful if you're not self-aware and have that ability to really hear others by not being distracted within yourself. So to close it out, one last breath. So that's what I have for you here today, folks. Any questions?
So you mentioned some mindful activities like going for a walk. What other things have you done and been successful with?
I think just being present in the moment in any way has been one that's really unlocked a lot. So again, knowing how and when to engage with my inner monologue. So when I'm playing with my kids, being there and present and not distracted by work or having mechanisms to take those ideas and put them somewhere safe. So I have this fear of, oh, I thought of something and I need to take action on it, then I forget it. Well, in that moment, I immediately throw it into a scratch pad and just jot it down so that I no longer start thinking about it. I no longer try to put it in my memory for long-term stability. I just take it, throw it into a bucket, and then I'll deal with it when I have time. So that helps me be more present. So, besides, walking, it's just doing mindful activities. I read Meditations. I'm blanking on how to pronounce his name. But he's a very well-known individual. And in there he said, doing an activity like washing the dishes. You can mindfully wash the dishes. You can feel that hot water on your hands. You can feel the texture of the soap rubbing against the plate. Just finding mindful activities wherever they are has probably been the easiest way to unlock it. Because let's be frank, who here has time to sit down for a half hour and meditate every day? I certainly haven't found time to do that yet. I can only find 5 or 10 minutes a day, and that's even a stretch. But if every activity that I'm doing is actually driving towards that mindfulness, I'm doing it in my regular routine, and so it's less impactful not having that 20 extra minutes because I've done it throughout the day. Any other questions, thoughts?
I would somewhere that not thinking mindfully also causes a lot of accidents. So like most accidents happen thinking about something else, and then even just like you drop a cup.
Yep.
You're washing dishes and you're thinking about the problem at work, and then all of a sudden, oh damn, smash that. And so like if you know that, maybe it helps to be a catalyst for trying to do that. And one thing that I do sometimes I just say it over and over in my head, like I'm washing this cup right now. I'm washing
Yep.
this cup right now. I'm washing.
Yeah, that's a great meditation technique, is finding that phrase that you repeat over and over again, because you're drawing attention to that particular phrase, and you're doing the same thing if you can't clear your mind enough to be mindfully attentive to something. Like, that is still drawing attention to focusing on something, which is the power that you're trying to unlock. Anything else? We got lots of time.
How many breaths did you take before the presentation today?
Well, if you would have come in here earlier, you would have seen me pacing back and forth. I didn't want to sit down in a lotus position or anything like that. So I just mindfully walked back and forth. So I didn't count, but it was definitely a substantial amount. Yes?
I was wondering if you have any practical applications of this with like too much screen time? Because I notice that there are times when I sit in front of the computer and I start looking at, like, I don't know, a newspaper site, and then reading that, and then that links me to somewhere else, and forget about Facebook, you know? But
Yeah.
Because before you look up, it's 2 hours.
Yep.
Or maybe not that bad, but whereas if I would bring some mindfulness to the experience, I would be able to say, okay, this is what I'm doing at this moment. I'm going to read this one article, maybe two, and then I'm going to do something else. Have you ever, sort of tried to mindfully deal with something like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that each time I find myself distracted like that, acknowledging it is a beneficial reaction. So rather than, oh man, again, I've lost myself in 2 hours. I keep doing this. Why do I keep doing this? If I instead label, hey, that's one of those things that you've talked about wanting to work on, just acknowledging it rather than, letting that inner monologue go to that fear-based negative reaction, just acknowledging it, saying, hey, you know what, next time I find myself in that position, I'm actually going to set a timer so that I stop myself. And no matter where I'm at, I am able to draw focus back to the present and making space for it, right? So, it's not as if I don't ever find myself distracted by TV or lost in a trail of articles and links. It's just I've created that space and that time to know that that's what I'm giving my attentiveness to. And then ultimately, when I find myself, breaking some of the cadences that I want to set as good habits, just naming reality and acknowledging it and doing my best the next time not to.
There's also browser add-ons that prevent
You could lock your, the iOS now has that too, where you could, limit the screen time. So you could put like physical barriers if you really find yourself limited, but yeah.
What do you do now? What is your position in the company?
Yeah, so I work at Paylocity. We're an HR and payroll software company. I lead a small design team that focuses on our talent suite of products, so onboarding, recruiting, performance management, stuff like that. And so I've really found that in one-on-one conversations, that's where this is most powerful for me. It's where my strength is. It's where I get the best feedback. It's in group situations that I'm still kind of trying to learn how to employ these tactics, because one-on-one you could create a lot more intimate of a conversation, whereas group you're trying to cater to the various types of personalities that you have, and it's a lot more reactive, and it doesn't have that same element.
I was going to ask if the mindfulness was a result of the culture of your organization, or was that something that you individually have brought in, and are you trying to infuse that into the culture more generally?
It was not a part of the culture. I've been on this journey since 2001, kind of building up my knowledge around it. It's really accelerated in the last 5 or 6 years. So around the time my daughter was born and around the time I joined Paylocity is when I really started to connect the dots between practical application and spirituality of it. There was a point in time where I was working with a team member sitting here in the front row, trying to do that for the organization, but they weren't as receptive to it. The culture itself didn't surface a lot of people that were engaged with it. But seeing the successes of folks like Ming at Google and doing it, I absolutely believe that it's an element of successful organizations moving forward to have leaders that are self-aware. Fred Kaufman says a lot about it in that book about how an organization that has somebody at the top who is attentive and mindful will find it kind of cascade down. So it's one of those things where trying to just share the right amount of knowledge with somebody when they're reaching for it is all that I'm doing right now. And then sharing here with you today is another step for me of bringing about that shared understanding. Yeah.
And looking at these values, so in the standpoint of empathy, is there anything that your team has done unique in terms of performance development, performance conversations? How have you handled that company-wide?
So I think regular one-on-one conversations and leaving breadcrumbs along the way. So one of the common themes in the performance evaluations I give of my team is, hey, was there anything in there that surprised you? And I have not had anybody come back to me with, yeah, you surprised me with that in the performance evaluation. Because, yeah, having that mindful attentiveness along the way, using tools to capture those conversations so there's a shared understanding, those are all ways that we are using our software to help, put forth these types of theories and kind of evolve with performance development, and not just having that, hey, this is what's gone well this last year and this is what you need to do next year. Regular, constant conversations with empathy absolutely make a big difference. Absolutely.
From my personal take in my background, I found that coming from like architecture, artistic, traditional schooling, we seem to not be as well schooled in what the values of leadership should look like and how to have maybe difficult conversations, how to have performance conversations. Whereas friends who come from more business backgrounds, like they seem to be very well educated in that, and
Yeah.
that their leadership is very well educated in that. Do you feel that that's an area we're lacking in terms of like schooling, education, and preparing people to actually be leaders in a management role?
Absolutely. And I think it's shown, I'm sure many of us in here have had a creative director boss that said, I don't like your idea, I'm just going to go ahead and do it myself here before the deadline. That type of lack of awareness and understanding of the impacts of that, I don't remember having regular one-on-one conversations until I got to Paylocity. So again, to your point, in this creative industry as a whole, it depends. If you're at a corporation that is mindful of leadership, so Paylocity has been putting me through through leadership programs now for, I think, probably close to 3 years. Various types, some that I've brought to the table, some that they've brought to me. But I don't think I would have gotten that same level of interaction at most agencies or in most consulting. It really takes attentive leaders inside those groups to set career paths, to really be aware of those types of elements in leadership and understand that, regardless if you want to manage people, having leadership skills are going to help you in those client conversations, are going to help you interacting with your peers, and are going to help level up the organization's success. Got 5 more minutes. Anybody else? Yes, Katie.
As designers, we're kind of taught to defend our design decisions, and that kind of has a negative connotation. Is there a way that we can approach that with that more of a positivity approach?
Defend.
Yes, and.
Yeah. So, Yes, and. So I think it's all a matter of how you characterize it. So if you characterize it as defense, you're going to get into that, like that position where you're trying to protect the idea. Again, whereas if instead of defending, you're just trying to articulate where you're coming from. Now, if it's just an internal thing that you believe and you have no other supporting data, probably means you should talk to some users and get some additional feedback to help drive the decision making. So I think ultimately when I look to defend decisions, it isn't about my personal opinion and why I ended up in this place. It's what supporting data helped me drive this outcome. What were the things that led me to this place, and using those as a balance to understand it. But again, instead of defending, just being receptive to what the other person is saying can also unlock a lot from the design process. So if you're in the position of, well, no, this is it because this is why, opposed to, okay, well, what are you trying to say? There might be a nugget of truth in there. Let's like break through your poor delivery because you're delivering this very negatively. Like, what is it that you're trying to say? There might be something there. So I think it's just a matter of how you approach it. So if you frame it as defending, you're right. It's going to have all of those negative emotions swirling around, both within you and the person who's delivering the feedback. But if you have that self-awareness to, react to that feedback in a more, emotionally controlled way, you might actually get to the truth that's being surfaced there. All right. Any parting words? Excellent. Appreciate everyone's time.